Alright, today we're going to talk about oblique sketching and drawing so that we can continue on and you'll be able to fill in and understand what it is you're doing on oblique 1.2 when we're drawing parallel lines and we're creating these boxes. So as an example, I'm going to draw this shape in oblique for you. And that way it'll help you understand the steps and what it really means when you're trying to draw something in oblique. So to start with, we're going to go ahead and talk about the box or the crate that every drawing will start with. Now in an oblique, you're going to start with the front view because the front view is shown true to scale as it is if you were drawing a multi-view. So here, we're going to go ahead and draw this, and we're just going to go true to accurate scale. So the width of this is 2.5 inches, and the height is 3 3/4 inches. So the first thing I want to do, just like if I'm making the front view in a multi-view, is create a box that is that tall. So I'm going to go ahead and do a horizontal one that was 2.5 inches. We're just making a front view. So I make my line 2.5 inches width, and I do my height at 2 3/4, I believe we said, or we said 3 3/4. Move over, do another line at 3 3/4. And connect the two. Okay, so what I did just there was made a huge block out that represents the total width and height of the shape. And so the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and make the depth, right? Because we have width, height, and now we're going to do the depth. Well, the depth on these is 1 1/4 inches. So this is where you got to pay attention, because now you need to take, and instead of drawing horizontal lines, we're going to draw lines at 30 degrees at the distance we've measured, right? So we said the distance was 1 1/4 inches. So from every corner, we're going to draw a 1 1/4 inch line. Every corner. So I'm going to measure up, and I'll measure over 1 1/4 here. And I'll measure 1 1/4 here, and even on the bottom down here, you'll measure 1 1/4. Now, if you were drawing these in pencil, as you see usually when I draw with red lines, these are very light lines because we're just creating a block out for the actual shape. So now I'm going to connect all the lines appropriately. And this is a full dimensioned oblique. There's different ways to draw them, but we're going to stick with a fully dimensioned, or what we call as a cavalier oblique. That means here you have your width, here we're going to have our height, and back here we have depth. Okay, so now what that means is we've got a basic block out. Well, let's go ahead and finish our front view now that we have all the basic dimensions. So I know, because these are 1 1/4 square, that we're just going to measure over 1 1/4, up 1 1/4, and over 1 1/4 to further define this kind of S shape, right? Like this Tetris block that we have. But since I know these dimensions are going to be pretty straightforward, I'm going to go ahead and start darkening in what I'm seeing. So we're going to measure over 1 1/4, and we have have the total height, which was up 2.5, right? Or you could come down 1.25. And then over here we come down 2.5. And all I'm doing is making the front view. Alright, now I can start lining these up. Notice how I'm using my tools to find all the appropriate sizes. My T-square gives me the straight edge. Okay, so there's that block out. And now I'll make my separation between the two.
I did it also.
What? Alright, so picking up where we are at, your front view would look something like this, right? Because whenever we're drawing an oblique, we're going to have one flat view, which is the front view. The front view tells you the most information. So now, the next step we want to do is create the depth to the object. And the way we're going to create the depth is we're going to take every one of these points that form the outside of the object, and we're going to project those back 1.25 inches, right? Because that's the depth of our object. Now I'm going to do that with a light pen, and then I'm going to come back and darken what you can see, right? Because we're going to have things that you can't see in 3D. So I'm going to take my triangle, making sure that it's flush against the back. I'm going to start drawing the 1.25 lines to the back. And the way we can do that is just by taking our scale and projecting all of these lines back. Well, we've done that line. Now we're going to do this point. And what this is called, this drawing that we're creating, is an oblique, but when you see all of these lines, it's going to be an a wireframe oblique. Remember, 1.25 inches from all points, or whatever your depth is from all points. All the edges, right? So these back edges, I'm going to project those too. Alright, we have this one's already drawn at 1.25. Let's do the last one here at 1.25. Now that we've made all of these rays, right, these angles that are all the same depth, right, 1.25 inches, we're going to go ahead and take in our pen and connect all those dots, again using a light pen. Now this is where you really got to pay attention so you don't lose your foreground and background, because as you'll see here, everything's going to start to come together to make the 3D shape. So that right there forms the solid object. That's everything we need to know. But now we only need to show what we can see, right? So I'm going to darken in, using my triangle and my straight edges, the lines that you can see in the drawing. So that would be all this face and up here only, right? All of this stuff in the back, these lines all become dashed or disappear completely. So let's go ahead and darken those in. And you can take and use your triangle to do all this. Remember, darkening only the lines that you see. So now we would be left with a sketch or a shape that looks like this. That's the resultant oblique view with the flat front view projected at 30 degrees. So now we can come back, if you really want to add that extra detail, and make these lines that you can't see but are that are part of the object hidden lines, because they're edges that are still there, but we still need to show them. So these become dashed lines as such. Again, making sure not to get lost in the drawing. You have to kind of double check, always take a step back before you draw a line to make sure. Because remember, in here, there's nowhere did I draw a line that was not vertically, horizontal, or 30 degrees. If you draw another angle, you need a good reason or an angular object to support that. Otherwise, everything should follow these rules. And your sketch will look as such. Right? That would be a basic cavalier oblique. Now for 1.2, what I want you to do is sketch. You don't have to use a straight edge, but it may help you. I want you to sketch inside each of the crates shown the adjacent crate, right? Or you can design something similar, but it needs to have about the same amount of features. So what I say when I'm talking about that is to kind of follow these directions, right? We want to first subdivide the crate into its major internal shapes, right? Because we have our diagonal box here. And this is sketching, so just take your time, but make sure you have good clean lines. Then this object here sort of looks like a bookshelf with two shelves, right? So we're going to subdivide that shelf into two. Now keep in mind, this is looking at it without the hidden lines. If we wanted to show hidden lines, we would put dashes in here like this, right, to show the backs. But then when you start doing that, you start losing a little bit of information. Gets a little busy, but that's okay if it helps you. So now that I've added all those in, right, we've subdivided our crate, we want to start breaking up the crate with these little partitions, right? These partitions are horizontal and vertical. They don't go back at an angle. They're only horizontal and vertical. So when you see them, they show up vertically and then they go horizontally. Right, now if you were to show the rest of them, they would become dashed lines until they went to the back of the bookshelf and forward. Right, but notice how as I start doing that more and more, it gets a little muddy. But let's just keep drawing these as they're shown. So you're getting the feel for how to create depth inside of your sketches. And so that becomes your last sketch. Now you want to take in what really counts with your dark pen, right, and show those components. So I'm going to go ahead and darken in my box. This is where the layers really matter. And then I'm going to darken in the subdivision in the floor of the bookshelf and show these angles. Now, to finally close it off, the edge that surrounds the whole drawing becomes one of the darkest, right? So in other words, this outside edge here becomes the darkest. Alright? Now, we're going to keep going. Right? We're just going to keep following along, duplicating this shape on here as accurately as possible. So we make our outlines. as shown. Make your inset, right, because I'm just duplicating this step by step, and as an oblique, always do your front view first. Right? Now, when we cut into this oblique and we want to show it hollow, we have to show those inside faces. So remember all these hidden lines that might show up? Well, now we need to show that line, right? The inside edge of this face here. Well, that becomes a dark line that then goes to the back corner. Because we would pretend that we're showing an offset on this back face. Now once you've shown that, we want to shade with vertical lines the inside face of the cube. Only the areas you can see. And then of course we come back and darken in everything that matters. Even those inside lines, those get to be a little bit darker as well. And then you do your vertical shading. And we take our largest, most bold pen and do the complete outline of the shape, right? The outline is like where does the object stop and the paper start. Alright, so now we've done our second one, and now you're going to proceed through, first creating the subdivisions, right, the major subdivisions, and then continuing on to complete the rest of these. And I'll move through as well to complete each one, as you'll see. Start with my light pencil. Make my subdivisions first. There's this vertical line that splits it. And then we've got this horizontal line that splits the whole shape. And finally, we're going to take and subdivide this into 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We're going to go up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There we go. And I'm just duplicating the shape. Notice the parallel lines when I go horizontal, when I go diagonal, so on and so forth. So now I'm going to take and fold in what matters. And keep adding the subdivisions. Paying attention to closely what goes where and what starts and stops where. And notice lines have to be parallel. Now we've got our basic outline. Let's shade in our horizontal lines because this is the front of the box. Tightly close. Take your time to freehand these or draft them. And now when they go into the background, they all become the angled ones, right? Well, we can take and turn our paper to where our lines are vertical, and we can add these lines vertically. They all must be parallel. Same for these in the back. Now we darken our outline. And we end up with a pretty strong block design, similar to what's shown. Next we'll do 1.3. Now, when you're all finished, your sheet will look something like this. You may have a design or an additional design in this area, but nonetheless, this would be oblique 1.2.